So today we have on a guest. I was just kind of telling her I've been kind of a fanboy since I heard her on the FKT podcast when she was talking about the Wind River High Route. She's got the fastest known times, unsupported female times on Gannett Peak, the WURL, and the Wind River High Route, and then several other trails as well. And like I said before we were talking, she kind of really is like the definition of a hybrid mountain athlete to me. So today we have on Kelly Halpin. How's it going?
Hey, Chad, how you doing today?
I am doing good. I just got actually back from Vail from 4 days, just like filming some content for Mountain House. That was a good time.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, so I'm happy to be back. But yeah, like we were talking about before, I was like, I don't even know what topic to start off with on this podcast because Kelly does so many cool, rad things. And like I said, the first time I ever heard of her was on the FKT podcast. They were interviewing her about her Wind River High Route FKT. And one of the things that struck me was the story about spending a night out with just an emergency blanket. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? What like an emergency blanket is? And when you were doing the Wind River High Route for the FKT, you actually just brought that as like your camp if you were going to be camping, I think, right? Or can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, anytime I do a big effort in the mountains where I'm going to be going usually through multiple nights, I bring an emergency blanket an emergency blanket so that if you get injured, you can wrap yourself in it and stay warm. Or if you somehow end up in a torrential downpour, it can kind of double as a shelter. Or if I have a partner and a partner gets injured, you can wrap yourself in that and stay warm. I think what you were referring to was the night my friend and I got stuck on a ledge. The first time we were putting together this route called the Teton Center Punch, which is a route we created that follows the hydrological divide of the Tetons from South Yellowstone all the way to Teton Pass. It's 70 miles. About 30 to 40% of it is technical ridgelines. And the first time we did it, we were on-siting the entire northern part of the route because it's so remote. It wasn't even worth going and scouting. It's just easier to just do the whole thing. And while we were going through the absolute most technical section around 2 a.m, we got stuck in a rainstorm. And this technical section involves 5th class climbing, which we were doing in the dark on lichen covered rocks, which weren't just slippery, but they were loose. And after spending, I can't remember at this point, but we wasted a lot of time trying to find the correct way through. And when we decided it was too unsafe to continue on, we wrapped ourselves in a blanket that we shared so that we could stay warm on this ledge, which is above 10,000 feet.
Right.
Until we had enough light to continue on safely. So, I mean, we kind of got benighted, although it was more like 2.5 hours where we just sort of like shivered. Anyway, that's why you carry an emergency blanket with you. And when I went to go do the Wind River High Route, which took about 59 hours unsupported because I'm trying to go light and fast, my only backup emergency shelter was an emergency blanket. So That's what I carried with me.
So so I carry one too. I've never actually used it. How warm are they?
They're not. They're not really warm. I mean, it helps
No.
if you have another person and you can both reflect heat, like on the center punch. But when I was alone on the high route, I tried to take a 30-minute dirt nap once I was about 24 hours in. And I was so cold, I actually didn't sleep at all. I was just shaking, even though I was curled up in a little ball. And, it does reflect heat, but it's not a lot of heat and not enough for someone like me who has a hard time regulating body temperature to really stay warm. So yeah, I wasted a lot of time trying to take a dirt nap and I never actually ended up taking a dirt nap. So yeah, that was, 59 hours on the route plus an additional 8 hours afterwards to hang out with my friends who picked me up. So I was awake for about 70 hours without sleeping.
Ooh, ouch. Were you?
Yeah.
That was on the Wind River High Route.
On the Wind River High Route. And I went into that with only 3 hours of sleep the night before because
Kelly,
it was so windy. My tent was just like shaking before I started the route, which I started at 3 a.m. So that was pretty extreme sleep deprivation.
That is, wow, that's crazy. Okay. So this is probably the common question you always get, but were you actually like, what is it called? Visualizing?
Hallucinating?
Yeah, I was like hyperventilating. That doesn't make any sense. Yeah, were you doing that at all?
Audible hallucinations. So I don't know if there's a proper term for that, but I was hearing things, but visually I was fine visually, but
Yeah.
I was I could hear all kinds of crazy things, voices, songs, people singing to me. It was wild.
I hope it was good music.
It was actually. It was lovely music.
Now, first of all, the Wind River High Route, so we attempted this last year, me and a buddy. Actually, me and 3 buddies did.
Oh,
Or,
nice.
2 other buddies did, and
The s
one of the
the Skirka variation,
it was
the same one I did.
yeah.
Okay.
Should not have started with that one as my first ever high route. Should not have done that. That was so freaking hard. So, and one of our buddies drove from Iowa to meet us there because he used to live in Seattle, moved to Ohio. He drove all the way there. He got COVID the day before, so
Ooh,
had to drive all the way back. So we lost him, and it was just me and another guy. And okay, that descent from Wind River Peak, we were like, "What is this?"
yeah, it's pretty loose. It's
I
extremely
mean,
loose, and there's big cliffs on it too. So,
big cliffs.
mhm,
So, yeah, I had like a boulder, I saw this, like I was, you're rock hopping or whatever, and I was rock hopping down there, and like a boulder came down on my leg, and I
yeah.
just was able to bench press it off before it came and just, I'm like, dude, we are out here. Anyway, long story short, we bailed.
Eh,
Like halfway through, like we didn't have enough. We thought we were gonna blaze through this thing. We did not bring enough food. We did not. So anyway, but that's my Wind River High Route story. So I already know, like that's why I have like so much respect for your FKT of that because I know how difficult it is. So how did you like piece by piece that like when you were training to do the FKT, like do a section and a section and a section and kind of like piece things together and or like how do you even go about, setting a record like that, like leading up to it? Must have to scout and things, stuff like that.
yeah, I think scouting helps a whole lot. There was one section of it in the middle I had not done before. A couple of years ago, I did an FKT of the other high route, which is the Wilson-Dixon variation, which is 80 mile.
Yeah.
And it misses a lot of the glaciers and high peaks, but it's a different version of a high route in the winds, and it's also very beautiful. It's a little more moderate if anyone's looking for a good one to backpack that's not quite as technical as the Skirka variation of the high route.
Right.
But the 2 high routes do share a couple of miles of trail. I mean, most of it's not on trail, but a couple of miles. So I went and scouted, let's see, I scouted the end because that's easy to get in and out of. It's like you can go in at Big Sandy and do basically like a 50K out into Lander, like up and over Wind River Peak and out. So I did that with a friend. We ran it. And then I fast packed with a friend of mine. I was supposed to fast pack the entire, well, I was doing it from Downs Peak all the way towards Wind River Peak. So I scouted that, what I thought was going to be that entire section with a friend, but he actually got so exhausted fast packing it that we ended up bailing. So there was probably a 30-mile section I had not done before.
Wow.
And that was trouble because I was hitting that in the dark and I missed a couple of pivotal turns and had to backtrack. And so, yes, most of it I scouted except for a 30-mile section, which I really wish I had scouted. And
Yeah.
if I go back and attempt to do the high route again, I might just, even though I've done it before, I might just go and fast pack the whole thing again, just to have it really, really dialed. But yeah, for prep, I like to be pretty familiar with the route most of the time. I mean, I have done FKTs where I've on-sighted the whole thing and that's been fine. But if you have a chance to scout a route ahead of time, it makes a really big difference.
Doesn't. Yeah, so Wind River High Route again is just one of the FKTs you've set, but the other one that I was interested in talking about too was the WURL, which is the Wasatch Ultimate Ridge Linkup.
Hmm.
So now I believe you did this one last summer, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I've done it 4 times, starting in 2018, 2019, 2020, and then skipped a year, and then last year I did it again.
So you really like the world. You just keep whirling around the world, don't you?
I do. Well, I had to go and do it a 4th time because the way I've always wanted to do it is unsupported. and
Yes.
nobody had really done it unsupported before. There's a little bit of a gray area where someone may have claimed to have done it unsupported, except that I believe someone actually brought them food on the route, according to them. So that's a bit of a gray area, and I don't really need to go into that. But besides that, nobody had really done it in a single push unsupported because there's almost no water on the route. I mean, pretty much there's no water on the route, but I went early enough to collect snow. Anyway, the first time I wanted to do it was I wanted to do it unsupported, but I didn't get the opportunity. And so the first time I was like, all right, fine, let me just go do it like the traditional way. I'll have caches. I'll leave myself caches and then maybe meet up with some friends. So first time I did it was just to do it. And that was great. It was great fun. It's really difficult, but it's really fun. It's beautiful ridgeline. Second time I got the female FKT on it, but because a friend dropped off an ice axe for me, so I
Oh,
wouldn't have to carry my ice axe the whole way, it didn't count as not even self-supported. mm, Even though I dropped my own caches, it didn't count as self-supported because someone brought me an ice axe, which is totally fine and totally fair. But I was like, "Ugh, I'm so close to being able to do it unsupported." Third time I did it because a friend of mine wanted to be guided on it, and so I ran it with him. And then the fourth time was because I was like, all right, enough is enough. I'm gonna go try to do it unsupported. And I did. I didn't make the time I wanted. I wanted to do it in sub 24 hours, but I got really sick because I got really dehydrated. I didn't have any food and almost no water the entire second half of it
dude.
until the last 8 miles when you can hit a creek again. So that was a bit of a struggle fest, but I am so happy I finally did it unsupported. And then a few weeks later, this guy went and did a men's unsupported time. So anyway, that's why I did it so many times.
Yeah. Yes.
And it is
Can you
beautiful, and I'll probably do it again at some point because it's just an
It is.
incredible route. It's incredible. It's really technical. It's definitely not a running route. It is a climbing route, and I just want to throw that out there. It is a climbing route.
Yeah, can you give the specs for it for the audience that might not be familiar with what it is and kind of maybe paint a picture in their minds of like kind of what it looks like and what it's like to do this route? Because we were talking about it earlier. I loved your like you're basically crawling.
Yeah, so it's the horseshoe that goes around Little Cottonwood Canyon outside of Salt Lake City. It's linking up all of the peaks of that horseshoe. I believe there are 32 or 33 named peaks on the WURL and a couple of unnamed little peaks. It's 36 miles and somewhere between 18 and 20,000 feet of gain. And most of it is off trail rock hopping with technical sections of fifth class climbing, mostly fourth class, but a few sections of fifth class. So you have to be really comfortable with exposure because it's very exposed. You have to be really comfortable with technical climbing and you have to be comfortable with the length of it because even though 36 miles doesn't sound like a long way, when you're going at a crawl, it is a very long way to go.
Yeah, that underscore that because I was telling Kelly I did like I don't even know if I can call it a portion. I mean, it was like an eighth or a tenth of like what the world was Lone Peak, and that took us. We were like, oh yeah, we're gonna hit that peak. We're gonna go over here. We're gonna swing over and hit this and come down that. And no, dude, like we we did like a quarter of like what we thought we were gonna do for the day, and it took us forever. So
Yeah.
the whirl is just something that I've always been fascinated with because I mean, yeah, it's like right there, right outside of Salt Lake. I mean, and it's
Yeah.
just so pretty.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful ridge link up. It's so clean. It's such a beautiful ridge line.
Now, and you said so one of the hardest things about unsupported is the fact that there's no water up there.
And won't use the water from the snowbird tram. In my definition of unsupported, you can only use my version is natural resources. So
Got it.
even though the snowbird tram is on the route and in the technical terms from the FKT site, if it's a free water source, a free public tap, you can use that and it counts as unsupported. But I didn't want to do it that way. I only wanted to use natural sources of water. So I went early enough in the year. I believe it was early July, so that I could use snow runoffs.
Yeah.
My mistake was that I thought, even though the temperatures at night were warm, I didn't anticipate how locked up the snowfields would get at night. So I wasn't able to get enough water because even though it was still in the 40s and 50s, the snow wasn't melting anymore. It was still pretty frozen. So
Yeah.
I wasn't able to just intake enough water to stay properly hydrated, which is why I got so sick on it. But you know,
I remember Dude, one of the pictures, I think it was when the sun came up. I think you put it on your story. You look pretty rough. I was like, damn.
Yeah, I puked a lot and I couldn't keep food down because I didn't have any water in me. I was basically just like eating handfuls of snow, and I was like, oh my god, like, which I couldn't filter because I was just eating it at that point, and I wasn't able to melt it with my body heat because I don't know, maybe I don't have enough body heat. I'm not sure. So anyway, it was an adventure, and I know most people would be like, that is a very silly way to do that route when you can just, have water caches on it. But I've done it that way before, and I wanted to do it in like a very pure style. So there you
Yeah.
go.
No, I think that's great. Like you didn't want it to be tainted by any part of like civilization, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't want any kind of unnatural assistance, and that would have included the tram at
Yeah.
Snowbird.
Yeah. That's admirable. That's so cool. So we have the whirl. Now, and you touched on this a little bit earlier, but the Teton Center Punch Traverse. This
Hmm.
is this is a traverse that basically you just made up. Well, I mean, you kind of, in a way, made up, but like, obviously, you studied maps and things like that. So, okay, so what inspired that? Well, first of all, can you tell us a little bit about what it is, and then what inspired it, and like what goes into actually creating your own like traverse like that?
Well, let's see. The history of how I came up with it was I knew that the the Teton Crest Trail, which is a very famous hiking, backpacking trail in the Tetons, it only covers half the range. And I was like, well, why isn't there a northern crest trail? So I started doing research, and there is. It's just not really utilized. It's very old trails that are pretty much faded and
Huh?
kind of, goes up to this dirt. Well, I actually I think it exits into Idaho, but there are old trails that go all the way up towards Yellowstone, but they're almost never used and hard to follow, and it's super
Huh?
remote. But while I was studying this, I was like, wow, like there's actually an incredibly beautiful ridge line goes across the entire spine of the Teton Range. And I started doing more and more research, and I was like, wow, like, I was looking at it on Google Earth. I was studying what I could from topo maps, and then, what I knew about those areas in the Tetons. The entire northern half is super remote. So I didn't really know much about that other than what I could see on Google Earth or on maps. But I was like, I think I can link up that entire ridge line. And then that would go into the southern part of the crest trail. And then rather than exiting the crest trail at Phillips, you stay on the ridge line. And I realized that that was following the hydrological divide of the Tetons. And I was like, wow, that is a really beautiful line.
That
Okay.
is cool. That's
Yeah.
cool.
So it's a natural line that follows the entire spine of the Tetons. And as I was like going through this, I was like, okay, like this section's like this section's like that. I think I can do all this. I started talking to another running friend of mine who loves to get wild in the Tetons. He's like a total cowboy, like runs around in like Grateful Dead t-shirts, like cotton t-shirts. And he like yo-yos the crest trail for fun in the middle of the night. Like he's a wild man and doesn't tell anybody, doesn't tell anyone. Like the stuff that he's done in the mountains is crazy. And I was like, hey, Fred, his name's Fred Most. I was like, have you ever been on this section, which is right behind the Grand before Table Mountain, which I think is the most technical part of the route? Have you ever been through there? And he goes, oh, yeah, I've been through there. And I'm like, well, of course you have. And so I was like, okay, let me bring him on and see
Right.
if he wants to like help create this route with me. And then we went and ran it. And that's when we got stuck in that technical section in the middle of the night because the entire northern half took us much longer than we anticipated because of all the technicalities involved in the climbing and scrambling. So rather than hitting it in the light, which is what we thought, we hit it in the middle of the night. And then we went and finished the route the next day. So that was, how long did that end up taking? Can't quite remember. I think it took 40 something hours to do it. And then when we went back and did it the following year, we did a much cleaner run of it all the way through in 36 hours. And then two friends of mine who are professional mountain runners went and dropped the time, I think, to 29 hours. They brought a rope with them. So they roped up for a couple of the technical sections, which is probably a good idea because it's very loose. Um,
Interesting.
and I know a couple of people after we created this route have backpacked it possibly, although that sounds a bit difficult because it is technical and it would be hard to haul a backpack around on some of that rock. But I know that there have been a few other people who've gone through and completed it once we established the route. So that's pretty cool. And I'm actually really excited for more people to go do it because it's incredibly beautiful. It's 70 miles. I think it's over 20,000 feet of gain. A lot of soloing. There is fifth class climbing on it. So if you're not comfortable with that, definitely bring a rope. And that rock is loose and it will crumble. So you got to be really aware. And I would recommend, because the rock is loose, you do it with a partner so that you have someone to spot you. And that's one of the reasons I didn't want to do the route alone, is because it's so loose and dangerous. It's like kind of just not worth it. But yeah, Teton Center Punch, it's so beautiful. And that northern part of the Tetons is incredible, and nobody goes up there. And
Yeah.
FYI, for anyone wanting to repeat it or go and do it, there are a lot of bear up there. So
Yeah, okay. It is a wild place up there, but no, that's so cool. Thank you for your story with that. That's incredible. I bet it feels so cool to like create your own route like that. I feel like that's such a cool thing to do that not a lot of people can say that like, "Oh, yeah, I created this traverse and I had the creativity to kind of look at this map and be like, that could link to that, that could link to here, and then go up." But that's only one part of it. The second part is actually doing it.
yeah, you have
And
to do
so,
it. You have to go do
yeah,
it yourself. You can't just like be like, oh yeah, this
right,
looks cool, and just like put it out there. The first person to complete a route, even if someone else comes up with it, is the one who gets to name it. So
right.
I mean, I could have come up with it, but if someone else did, they could have claimed it as their route. So,
Yeah, yeah, true.
you know,
Sure, it's so cool. So, well, you said so you've talked a lot about, especially and like with this traverse, you're like, hey, there's some fifth class stuff on here. Got to be comfortable soloing and things like that. And one of the things that when I was doing my research on you is that you've been climbing for like 30 years around there. Yeah,
31 years. Yeah.
crazy. So, and then you did some bouldering competitions, I think like in the 2000 like, or maybe early 2000s or something like that, but yeah, somewhere around there, and you, like, placed 1st, and basically you were crushing it is what I'm trying to say here, right? So
I used to train for bouldering comps. I used to climb
yeah.
like 3 hours a day back when I lived in
Wow.
Los Angeles. I was in college in Los Angeles, and
Oh, wow.
I loved climbing, but that was mostly in bouldering gyms. And I used to go to Joshua Tree to climb a lot and go up
Mhm.
to Yosemite and Bishop. But for the most part, I was just like training in my local bouldering gym. And
Yes.
yeah, I got really into competitions, and yeah, yeah, it's really fun.
Well, so that's my question is, like, how has your experience in climbing kinda helped you with some of these traverses and the whirl and stuff like that? Like, how has it helped you become, like, kind of a good, like, all-around mountain athlete?
Well, I wouldn't have started running if I hadn't climbed. I mean,
Interesting.
basically, I was always a climber, and when I realized I could just run up and down mountains, and I'm like, okay, well, why spend all day like hiking them when I can go run them? And so it's sort of like this
So
merging of
true.
you know trail running and climbing, and that's called mountain running. And so
Yeah.
that is currently what I do.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think a lot of people know you most people know you probably for your mountain running, right? Like, just, like, the pure, like, trail running and stuff like that, and then it's like but if you, like, really go to your page and stuff like that, you really see, like, dang, like, she's actually, like, an exceptional I can't even say the word. You know what I'm trying to say? She's a very good climber, and so but that actually came first. That's crazy, I didn't know that.
No, but I mean, I'm not as strong of a climber as I used to be, because I used to just climb, and
Yeah.
I was a much stronger climber when I was focusing on climbing, and now I'm mostly running. So, like if I went and tried to like on-site a 511, I'd probably be struggling.
Oh, yeah, me too. I would be struggling as well on sighting a 511. I know. Yeah, no. I get it. If so this kind of this is a good question. So if you could only do one thing for the rest of your life, you could either climb, run, snowboard. Which one
It
would
has
it
to be
be?
one of those 3. I would pick something else if it had to only be those.
Oh, interesting. Okay, what would it be?
Walking around in the mountains,
Just walking. Just doing
just
some
being
hiking.
outside.
Yeah.
I would do that.
Yeah,
If I had to do that forever, I would probably be okay.
just walking. Like, you can't get up to a run though.
Nope. Just wandering around looking at things. I love foraging. I love looking at wildflowers. I love looking at wildlife. As long as I could get outside into the forests or mountains
Yeah.
every day, I think I would be okay.
I love it. I love it. And So, gosh, that's so cool. What is it about pushing yourself in the mountains that's so special to you, do you think?
I think it's just trying to push have the most fulfilling human experience while I'm alive.
Dang, that's good.
Just yeah, because 'cause I'm curious, like, you always wanna know where the edge is, so you push towards that edge, and you just have, like, incredibly the more you push, the more pure and raw experiences you have, and the more you learn about yourself, and I don't know, it's just exploration.
You're a yeah, it's like the modern day adventurer, kind of. Especially, like, when you're establishing your own traverses and things. I mean, that's, like, really being, like, adventurous, I think.
Yeah, it's fun. I've got a couple other ones, yeah, that I'd like to sort out. They look like they
Oh
might be too technical, but, I got some plans in the future to see if I can link up some
oh
other peaks.
oh, really? Are it, like, kind of around in the Tetons there again?
In Wyoming. Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
see what
yeah,
if it's possible. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get around to it this summer, but maybe.
yeah, yeah. What do you got planned this summer, by the way?
Let's see, I might potentially run the high route again because I'm not satisfied with my time on it. There's a couple places where I screwed up the route and my dirt nap that didn't really work out. I didn't end up sleeping anyway, so I'm like, well, it's like some time I can take off right there. And I had some foot problems on it too. I was wearing a pair of shoes that was oversized on purpose to accommodate for foot swelling, but I actually wore a pair of shoes that was way too big for me and it caused a lot of really painful giant blisters. So
Oh,
the last 17 miles out, I was biting down on a stick.
no way.
Yeah, I was in so much pain. I had to
You're
yeah, it was really bad because I made the mistake of well, a couple of them burst while I was walking or like,
Mhm.
like trotting out, limping out. And then I just decided to drain the rest of them, and that was a really bad idea, and I had to bite down on a stick and just I was
Really?
limping out for a while, and then I finally got into a run again, and it was just it was really painful. So I would like to go back and just do it better, but like everywhere in the West, we had a massive snow year, so I don't know what the conditions are right now, and some of my other goals are also gonna be affected by how much snow there is, so
Right.
really, I'm not entirely sure until I get up into the mountains and can kinda see for myself what is going to be appropriate for this year because there's so much snow right now.
Yeah, yeah, there is a lot. Okay, biting down on a stick. I feel like that's, like I didn't even know that that worked, actually. That's, like, a really old school, like, that right? Like, you always see, like, people that are, like, in old movies or something, like, somebody's getting surgery or something. They're like,
Yeah.
Did it actually work?"
Well, I don't know. I was just, like, gritting my teeth so hard, I was like I thought I was gonna
Yeah.
break my teeth. So I was like, "Well, I'm just gonna bite down on
Oh,
a stick instead."
oh, Kelly, you are gritty. I love it. Dang, 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 dang. Before I wanted to get into your so Kelly's also a very talented artist. I wanted to kinda ask this question because I know you split board. I also split board, and my question would be, what do you think about when you go with skiers?
Oh, I usually
How
just go with skiers.
do you really? So, my
But that's
thing
not on purpose, it's just that most people in Jackson are skiers.
oh, gotcha, yeah. Do you ever feel like, you're probably not. I always feel like when I go with skiers, I'm like the slow person with the split board, frickin'
Eh.
with all the heavy stuff, and I'm trying to put it together, and I'm, this and that. And I'm like, God, I gotta go with more split boarders.
No, I think the where it becomes tricky is not transitioning. I mean, I can transition my board back and forth really quickly. It's when you're side hilling out that it becomes an issue where you don't have enough
Mm,
speed to traverse and you do these small uphills where the skiers can sidestep up and down.
yeah,
That's where I have trouble because I can't do that on a split board. I'm not good at split skiing. I know some people can do that with their
right.
split boards. I have not learned how to do that yet. And even if I did, it's so I'm using soft boots, not hard boots, so
Yeah,
it's squishy and you can't really edge the same way, so I can't do the step up and step down thing, so that's where I lose time, is
interesting.
when you have to do those weird little tiny transitions, like up and down that the skiers can just, stay in one mode for, and I'm like, "Oh my god," like, I
I
have to take my
know.
board off, and then I have to, like, hike up and then put it back on,
Yeah, I know.
or I just skin. I'll just, like, skin out the whole way because that at least that way I can stay in one mode and just go, like, get up and
Right.
then sort of slide down. And
Oh, the split board. Yeah, the Achilles heel of the split boarders. Yeah,
I
every
get
time I
so
go.
mad sometimes.
Oh, me too.
Yeah, yeah, I get pretty frustrated when it's like the long transitions out of the canyon. I'm like, oh my God, like,
I'm glad I'm not the only one with that because every time I go with skiers, I'm like, this is the stupidest thing ever. I'm like, why? I need to just learn how to ski. But then I'm like, no, it's so fun to snowboard and I've been doing it for so long. But gosh, but you know what? Splitboarding's awesome. It's like one of my favorite things to do now. I've
it's
only been
really
doing it for,
fun.
but like, isn't it a great way to stay in shape, like for
Hmm.
running, like all year round?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's a great way to just be out in the mountains when you can't get there any other way.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Just exploring some cool things and yeah. Well, cool. So Kelly, so like I was saying, Kelly is also an artist, and so I was looking at some of your illustrations and was pretty blown away by some of these things. First of all, I'm blown away by anybody that can really draw because I can't barely do a stick figure, make it look cool. I mean, I don't understand. I just can't comprehend how you put that on a page. That's crazy to me. But you just came out with, maybe you didn't just come out with it, but you did come out with a children's book called Wildlife in the Tetons. So, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I've illustrated maybe 10 children's books before. I did my own book, Silas in the Last Forest, a couple of years ago and self-published that. And that's a narrative story kind of in a dark future where humans don't go outside anymore. And this little boy wants to explore the last forest, which he finds a photo of. And he's like, okay, I'm going to go find that, and finds his like life is much more complete being out in nature. And then last year, I self published a wildlife book for children called Wildlife in the Tetons, and it's focused on mammals in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. And yeah, it's just a good way to introduce children to wildlife in kind of a fun way. And so they can go out and, try to check off boxes and see what animals they see in the forest. And I'm currently working on a bird edition to follow that up with.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yes. Dope. Cool. Now, is it more challenging to, okay, I'm sure they're very different, but is it more challenging to illustrate and write a book or do an FKT?
A book.
Longer?
Because the process, like going back and forth, like putting the book together is just sort of
Right.
like it's just frustrating. It doesn't really feel like there's a reward. You're just like, oh my God. You know, but I don't know, both processes are fun. Kind of fun.
Yeah, they have their own things, I'm sure, yeah. Now, so you're doing a bird book as well, and I'm
Mhm.
guessing that's gonna be kind of around, like, in the Tetons too?
Yeah,
Same thing?
same
Yeah.
thing.
How has, like, the environment around where you live in Jackson, how has that shaped your, like, artistic style and, like, your subject matter, do you feel like?
I mean, everything I draw is has something to do with nature for the most part, in one way or another. It's very, very nature based. Yeah. I mean, I draw lots of trees, skulls, mountains, but mostly in a very surreal way. I mean, I do some landscapes and some more basic compositions of natural elements, but my favorite things to draw are when you kind of mix it up with the surreal and
Yeah,
kind of,
'cause
yeah, I like to explore that realm.
yeah, because I've seen some of those. They're like super unique. Like, because it's like I think one was the Grand and Middle Teton, and but it was like not like it wasn't just like that you just drew a mountain. It was more of like all these leading lines and things like that. And so, what kind of inspires that for you? Like, how do you even think? Like, how does that come up? I I've just been so fascinated with art. I don't know.
Well, my whole family, everyone's an artist in some way in my family. So my sister and I grew up drawing and painting. My mom is an artist. So I don't know, my sister and I grew up with art all around us and a lot of inspiration. And my parents are very supportive of the arts, and we went to galleries a lot and had a lot of art books. So there was inspiration everywhere. But I think specifically for what I'm doing now, it's just, a mix of the experiences I have in the mountains with kind of a dreamlike realm,
Yeah.
I guess. And, there are a few that are just mountains, but like I said, my favorite are the more surreal ones.
Yeah, they're super unique, super cool. I think I'll definitely link that below too so people can check those things out. And okay, so I had some audience questions too, by the
Okay.
way, before we wrap up. But so Becca Tarbox, she lives in Oregon. I know I've communicated with her a couple times. She goes, "Kelly is rad!" Exclamation point. Is she still on the fence about Barkley? And I'm guessing the Barkley marathons. I didn't know
Mhm.
about this. I didn't know that you were considering that. What's the answer there?
I well, I've just like inquired about it a little bit. I just like the wild nature of it, how it's
Yeah.
kind of survivalist style, and that's what I like to do. So I'm not really interested in races anymore. I used to race,
Yeah.
but I'm a lot more interested in just like the pure, you know, yourself in nature without any aid is definitely like the niche I like to explore. And the Barkley is as close as you can get to that, where even though you do come back in loops to the trailhead, you go out every single time. You're just pretty much on your own, and it's just like survival style, and it has a lot of vert, and I like that. But I don't know. It takes a lot of work, and you have to be very lucky to even get into those in the first place.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's just something I'm like, maybe.
You have it. I mean, I feel like you definitely have the resume to get in there. I know, isn't it like you have to kind of know somebody maybe or something like that?
There's a lot of crazy things you have to do to get to get into that. And then I think there's a lottery as well. So there's absolutely like no guarantee that I could even get into it. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
don't know. I just thought it'd be fun to try to
Well, I
like
think
make those times. It's like a fun challenge. But yeah, I don't know. Just seems kind of wild.
it does. It does seem wild.
Wild suffer fest.
Yeah, it does. You know, as you were talking about that, I was like, you know what you'd be really good on would frickin' Survivor.
Oh no. I've been asked to be on those shows before and I have
Oh,
no
really?
interest. I have no interest in doing any of those TV
Kelly on
shows
Survivor?
or like Naked and Afraid. I have absolutely no interest in that. I just the TV aspect of it. Like I'm just like, no, I don't. No.
Yeah. Well, they would likely make you over dramatize things and, do all
Yeah,
makes sense.
I'm not good at that. I've been on the Weather Channel before on stories of survival, and even that they kept trying to push me to like exaggerate.
Really?
And I was like, they're like, yeah, like you were probably shaking and like scared out of your mind. And I was like, not really. No, actually it was fine. But that doesn't make good TV. So I was like, no, I can't do the bullshit aspect of it.
Yeah, yeah. That's funny. We had a buddy in college that was on. Do you remember like MTV? There was like some dating show on MTV. It wasn't. I don't know what it was called, but he was selected to be on that when I used to live in Minnesota, and I remember him saying like how they like really kind of planted different things to really drive the story and things like that.
Yeah.
And it's like I get it because it's on TV, but like at the same time, yeah, you're really compromising your integrity. Which for you,
Yeah.
especially just kind of knowing you and talking to you right now, which is something that's really big for you. So it's like probably not the best fit.
Yeah. I mean, I used to study film, so I understand telling a story, I get it, but it's very hard to do reality TV because you need to have drama in order to get
Yeah.
people to watch. So, and sometimes in reality there isn't any drama and that doesn't make good TV. So, yeah,
Right.
that aspect I'm just gonna like stay away from stay away from that personally.
So, so all the Survivor producers that are listening to my podcast. She's not going on. So we had another question, which was, what is your training like? As in, I'm sure that you're, going to the gym, probably doing some different types of exercises, maybe like yoga, stuff like that. Like, what does that look like on a weekly basis? And how do you balance that with, putting the vert on your legs and, really, especially like on the downhills and stuff like that. And then I'll try to like lift the next day or like lift a couple days before that. And it's like, dude, like I'm like dying. So how do you balance that stuff? Like what does your training regimen look like?
Well, I have a coach. My friend Casey Clark is my coach. She's been my coach for a few years. I do run through the winter. I don't run a ton of mileage in the winter because it's freezing in Jackson and we don't have any trails to run really in the winter. There's like a few bike trails that you can run on, but for the most part, you're just running on road.
Yeah.
But I do maintain my running fitness throughout the winter. And then as it gets warmer out, I ramp up mileage every week and I work in speed workouts. And every single day, almost every single day, I do roughly 40 minutes of stretching, yoga, PT, and weights
Interesting.
and focus
Cool.
on different areas.
Yeah.
And yeah, and as the trails start to melt out with the season, I get more and more vert worked in. Whereas in the winter, the only vert I can get is either boot packing or skinning, or I do lunges and squats.
Yeah.
But as the trails start to melt out and the season warms up, I get more and more vert and work that up. And so it's a really nice flow with the seasons. And then
Excellent.
I, have my peak mileage and vert obviously throughout the summer months when it's mountain running season. And then in the fall, I kind of like start to taper out. And usually I go on climbing trips and take a little break and let my legs rest and do some more climbing.
Yeah, I mean, and I love that because the seasons almost kind of dictate like you periodizing your training in a way.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, just because Jackson's so extreme, it's hard to be able to really trail run throughout the year unless I travel somewhere else because it's just I mean, we have very extreme winters here.
Right. But it's like for me, I would probably get burnt out if I was running all year the same I was running like in the summer. I'd be like I would be super burnt.
Yeah,
Just
I
like
mean, it gets boring in the winter. It does. But like I said, I don't do as much mileage in the winter. I mean, it's
but you
much
split board.
slower. I do split
But
board. Yeah.
yeah,
And I mix
split
that up.
board and get your vert that way. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's freaking awesome. No, I love it. Well, Kelly, this has been a great time. Thank you so much for coming and coming on the video and scheduling a time. I know you're super busy, so I really appreciate it. You're an awesome person. It was great hearing some of your stories. We'd love to probably have you on at some other point if you're down. And I'm sure my audience is going to love this, get a bunch of good nuggets out of it. And yeah, you're just super inspiring. Like, keep crushing it. Man, you're just awesome.
Oh my gosh, Chad, thank you so much for having me on. It was really fun to talk with you. Yeah, I can't wait to to see the finished product and I hope that you have a fantastic adventurous summer and same to everyone else out there listening. Happy trails.